Star Trek really needs to stop wasting TNG's most underrated alien species. Here's why. When Star Trek: The Next Generation premiered in 1987, it didn't just reintroduce the galaxy of the Federation, it expanded it with dozens of new alien species, some destined for franchise-defining roles, others left to drift in the corners of memory. The Klingons became allies, the Borg became the ultimate enemy, and the Romulans retained their classic menace. But tucked between those major players, TNG introduced an alien race that should have become a cornerstone of Star Trek storytelling, but instead has been consistently underutilized. The Temerians, also known as the Children of Tama, best remembered from the Season 5 episode Dharma. The Temerians communicated entirely in allegories and cultural references, speaking not in literal words but in shared stories. Their language was so dependent on metaphor that it was virtually incomprehensible to outsiders. This made them one of the most original, thought-provoking species ever conceived in the franchise, yet they've appeared only sparingly since. Star Trek has an entire universe of opportunities for the Temerians, and it's high time the franchise stopped wasting them. Dharma changed how we think about First Contact. In the pantheon of TNG episodes, Dharma is widely regarded as one of the most profound examinations of communication. Captain Picard and Captain Dathan of the Temerian vessel are stranded together on a dangerous planet. Struggling to understand each other, they ultimately bridge the gap not through universal translators or technobabble, but by sharing in the symbolic imagery of Temerian myth. By the episode's end, Picard has grasped enough of their cultural stories to form genuine understanding. Narmak and Jalad at Tanagra become shorthand for cooperation, triumph over adversity, and the shared bond of struggle. It's one of Star Trek's purest distillations of Gene Roddenberry's vision that communication, empathy, and patience can bridge even the widest of cultural divides. But here's the problem. After one of the greatest explorations of language and culture in television history, the Temerians were largely shelved. We've seen Klingons go through centuries of political upheaval, Borg evolve from nightmare to antiheroes, and Vulcans endlessly dissect logic, but the Temerians remain stuck in a single brilliant episode. Why the Temerians deserve more. The Temerian concept of language as metaphor opens the door to endless narrative possibilities. Unlike other species, their entire worldview is framed through stories. To them, myth isn't just entertainment, it's the foundation of diplomacy, survival, and identity. Imagine the dramatic and comedic potential if Starfleet officers were forced to adapt to this way of thinking. For instance, diplomatic tensions. Negotiating a treaty with Temerians would require not only translators but cultural historians who can decode myths, essentially turning diplomacy into a kind of literary analysis. Misunderstandings as conflict. A Temerian battle cry, misinterpreted as an invitation to peace, could spark conflict. Conversely, what seems like a threat might actually be a gesture of friendship. Cross-cultural fusion. Imagine a Federation officer beginning to adopt Temerian allegories in conversation, blending two cultures into something entirely new. The Temerians embody one of Star Trek's central themes. That diversity is not just aesthetic, but conceptual. They challenge the Federation's assumption that universal translators can solve everything, pushing the idea that true understanding requires immersion in another culture's stories. Missed opportunities in modern Star Trek. Since TNG, the Temerians have appeared in only a handful of places, mostly on the margins. The most notable was the character Cation, a Temerian who appeared in Star Trek: Lower Decks. While the animated comedy did a fun job poking at the difficulties of his allegorical speech, the franchise still hasn't tapped into the full depth of what the species represents. Strange New Worlds, with its episodic and character-driven style, would be the perfect series to revisit the Temerians in a live-action format. Discovery, set in the far future, could explore how their culture has evolved over centuries. Perhaps their metaphors have expanded into galactic-scale myths involving the Federation itself. Even Picard, had it wanted to connect to TNG's most humanistic themes, could have returned to the Temerians as a reflection of Jean-Luc's legacy as a diplomat. Instead, they remain a footnote in Trek lore, remembered fondly by fans of Dharma, but rarely explored beyond that. Why Star Trek needs them now more than ever? In today's world, communication barriers feel sharper than ever. Cultures clash. People talk past one another, and shared meaning can get lost in translation.
What?